The morning sun peeked weakly through a curtain of gray clouds as Linda Parker stood at her kitchen window, sipping her first cup of coffee. The Seattle rain had been relentless all week, and the sound of droplets against the glass filled the small, quiet house. At 58, Linda had grown used to solitude. It was peaceful, predictable. Her husband, Mark, had passed away years ago, and her son Ethan, now 32, lived on the other side of the city, buried in his fast-paced career. She looked at the clock to 9:15 a.m. She had a doctor's appointment at 10. Normally, she would have taken the bus, but the rain was heavier than usual, and her knees weren't what they used to be. She reached for her phone, planning to order a ride, when it suddenly buzzed in her hand. "Hey, Mom," Ethan's familiar voice came through. "Don't take the bus today. I'll drive you." Linda blinked, surprised. Her son rarely had mornings free. "Ethan, you don't have to. I want to." He interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The call ended before she could argue. Linda set the phone down slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Ethan had always been thoughtful, but lately he'd been distant, too caught up in work and deadlines. She missed their quiet talks, their laughter. Maybe today would be a chance to reconnect. She hurried to change, putting on a pale blue sweater and her favorite gray scarf. When she glanced at herself in the mirror, she sighed. Her once dark hair was now silver, and fine lines framed her soft blue eyes. Yet there was still warmth in her reflection, a quiet grace that came from years of love. Loss and learning. A familiar sound outside pulled her from her thoughts. She peeked through the window and saw Ethan's dark sedan pulling up. Even through the drizzle, she could see how much he had grown tall, serious, with that calm confidence that always reminded her of his father. Linda grabbed her purse and umbrella and stepped outside, the crisp air brushing her face. Ethan got out of the car and hurried to open the passenger door for her mom. He said with a smile, "You still walk faster than I do." She laughed softly. "Only when I'm late." Once inside, the warmth of the car wrapped around her. The faint scent of coffee and leather filled the air, so much like Ethan. He adjusted the heater, then glanced over at her. "Seatbelt on." "Yes, yes," she said, buckling up. "You sound just like your father." Ethan chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." As they drove off, the rain came down harder, drumming against the windshield. For a while, neither spoke, lost in the rhythm of the road. Linda watched the familiar streets blur past, a hint of nostalgia settling in. She remembered all the mornings she had driven Ethan to school. His backpack too big for his small frame, his excitement always contagious. Time had a way of slipping quietly, she thought. After a few minutes, she broke the silence. "You've been working too much again, haven't you?" He exhaled, smiling faintly. "You sound like my manager." "Maybe she's right then," Linda teased. Ethan chuckled, but didn't respond. His eyes stayed fixed on the road, though she could see something in them, something heavy. Concern, maybe, or exhaustion. "Everything all right, Ethan?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "Yeah, just. A lot on my mind lately." She didn't press. Ethan had always been private, even as a boy. When something weighed on him, he needed time before he could talk about it. Instead, she leaned back, letting the hum of the car fill the silence. But then he said something unexpected. "Mom," Kay began carefully, "can I ask you something? Kinda personal." Linda turned to him, eyebrows raised. "Of course." He hesitated, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. "Did you ever feel lonely after Dad passed? I mean, really lonely?" The question caught her off guard. She stared out the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. "That's not something you ever really stop feeling," she admitted softly. "But you learn to live with it. Some days it's quieter than others." Ethan nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about him a lot lately." That tugged at her heart. "Your father was proud of you, Ethan. You know that, don't you?" "I hope so," he murmured. "But I wasn't around much when he got sick. I still regret that." Linda reached over and touched his arm gently. "He understood, sweetheart. You were just starting your life." The car fell silent again, but this time The silence wasn't empty. It was full of emotion, memories, and the unspoken bond between them. At a red light, Ethan turned to her, eyes thoughtful. You know what's funny? I thought driving you today would just be a small favor. But sitting here with you, it feels like something I should have done a long time ago. Linda smiled, touched. You're making it sound like we're strangers. Sometimes, he said quietly, it feels like we are. The light turned green and he drove on, leaving Linda to sit with the echo of his words. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It wasn't often that Ethan opened up like this. Maybe the rain, the quiet, the memory of his father, maybe it all made him reflective. They reached downtown earlier than expected. Ethan parked outside her doctor's building but didn't unlock the doors. Instead, he turned toward her again, eyes uncertain. Can we grab a coffee before your appointment? He asked. There's a place nearby I've been meaning to try. Linda smiled, pleasantly surprised. You're offering me coffee? I'd never say no to that. They walked together through the drizzle, sharing one umbrella like they used to when he was little. The small cafe on the corner smelled of roasted beans and cinnamon. Warm light spilled through the windows, and the chatter of people inside made it feel cozy and alive. Ethan held the door open for her. After you, Mom. Linda smiled at him again. That small, motherly smile that carried both pride and a touch of sadness. They found a corner table by the window. The rain streaked the glass beside them, and for the first time in months, Linda felt something stir. Not excitement, exactly, but a quiet happiness. Ethan ordered 2 cappuccinos and a slice of banana bread to share. Still your favorite? He asked. Remembering without having to ask, she laughed softly. You have a good memory for the important things. When the drinks arrived, they sat in silence for a while, the comfort between them settling in. Ethan stirred his coffee slowly, eyes downcast, as if searching for the right words. Then, finally, he looked up. Mom, he said quietly, there's another reason I wanted to drive you today. Linda felt a flicker of unease. What is it? He hesitated again, his expression gentle but serious. I've been thinking about you lately, about how much you've done for everyone all these years. And I realize maybe I haven't done enough for you. His words landed like a soft shock. For a moment, Linda couldn't find her voice. She studied his face, the sincerity in his eyes. There was no pity, just genuine care. Oh, Ethan, she said finally, you've done more than enough. You're my son. You don't owe me anything. He smiled faintly but didn't look convinced. Maybe not. But I still want to do something. For you. Linda's heart swelled with emotion. It wasn't the words themselves that moved her. It was the tone. It's the honesty, the warmth she hadn't realized she'd been missing. She reached across the table, her hand resting lightly over his. Just spending time like this. That's already a gift. Ethan squeezed her hand gently. Then I'll make sure it's not the last time. Outside, the rain had begun to ease, and a faint sunlight filtered through the clouds. Inside, a quiet peace filled the air, the kind that comes not from grand gestures, but from small, heartfelt moments that remind you how deeply love can exist between 2 people who once shared everything. Linda sipped her coffee, her eyes glistening with warmth. It wasn't just a ride anymore. It was a turning point, one she didn't even know she needed. The air outside was crisp as evening fell over the quiet suburban neighborhood. Emma stood by the front door, holding her purse and jacket, still thinking about what Daniel had said earlier. His tone, sodden seriousness, the way he looked at her as if something weighed on his mind. The day had started like any other, but now she felt something unspoken was about to unfold. When Daniel's car pulled into the driveway, its headlights cutting through the dusk, she took a deep breath and stepped out. Hey, Mom, Daniel said with his usual calm smile, leaning over to open the passenger door. Ready? She nodded, sliding into the seat. The warmth of the car wrapped around her and a faint melody played from the radio. Something soft, old, and familiar. For a while, neither of them said anything. The city lights shimmered through the windshield as Daniel turned onto the main road. Emma glanced at her son. He looked focused, his hands steady on the wheel, but there was a heaviness in his eyes, something thoughtful, even tender. "You've been quiet all day," she said softly. "Is everything okay?" Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes still on the road. "Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you about something, somewhere private." Her heart skipped a beat, not from worry, but from curiosity. "Private? You're starting to sound mysterious." He laughed lightly, but it didn't hide the seriousness beneath his tone. "It's nothing bad, I promise. Just something I've been thinking about for a long time." The car slowed as they reached a scenic overlook outside town, a place Emma used to take him when he was little. The hill rose gently above the valley, the city glowing below like a carpet of stars. Daniel parked the car and turned off the engine. The sudden quiet was peaceful, almost sacred. Emma smiled, nostalgia washing over her. "You remember this place?" "How could I forget?" Daniel said, leaning back in his seat. "You used to bring me here when I was upset about school or life. You'd say, 'Look at the lights, Danny. The world's bigger than your worries.'" She chuckled softly. "I used to say a lot of things. I'm surprised you remembered." He turned to face her, his eyes warm but intense. "I remember everything, Mom." Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. There was affection there, deep and genuine, but also a weight she couldn't quite name. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was filled with a hum of memory and emotion, the kind that lingers between people who've shared a lifetime together. Finally, Emma spoke, breaking the quiet. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Daniel took a slow breath, as if steadying himself. "I know it sounds strange, but lately I've been thinking about how much you've done for me. After Dad left, you gave up everything, your job, your time, even your dreams, just so I could have mine. I never thanked you properly." Her throat tightened. "You don't have to thank me. I'm your mother. That's what I'm supposed to do." Maybe," he said softly, "but it doesn't mean I shouldn't appreciate it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. Black, simple, elegant. He handed it to her without saying another word. Emma blinked in surprise. "Daniel, what is this?" "Just open it." Inside was a silver locket, delicately crafted, with a small photo of them together inside, one from years ago when he was just a boy. On the other side was an engraving, "For everything you gave and everything you are." Emma stared at it, her eyes stinging. "Oh, Daniel." Her voice trembled. "This is beautiful. You didn't have to. I wanted to," he interrupted gently. "You always gave to everyone else. You never let anyone give back. I just wanted you to know I see you, not just as my mom, but as a person." She looked at him, her heart full and heavy all at once. "You've grown up," she whispered. "When did that happen?" He smiled softly. "Probably around the time I realized how strong you really are." They sat there, the world quiet around them, the glow of the city below like distant fireflies. Emma turned the locket over in her hand, feeling its weight not just of silver, but of love, years, and unspoken gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen. Then Daniel spoke again, his voice lower, more serious. "There's one more thing." She turned to him, curious. "What is it?" "I know you've been lonely since Dad left," he said quietly. "You act like everything's fine, but I can tell. You laugh, you stay busy, you fill the house with noise, but it's not the same, is it?" Her eyes widened. "Daniel, that's not something you need to worry about." "I know," he said quickly, "but I do worry. You've always been there for everyone else. Maybe it's time someone's there for you." His words hung in the air, sincere, caring, and heartbreakingly real. Emma turned away, blinking back emotion. "You're such a good man," she whispered. Daniel reached over and lightly placed his hand on hers. It was a small, simple gesture, one filled with affection, not anything else. But it carried so much warmth that Emma felt tears rise again. "I mean it," he said softly. You deserve happiness, Mom. You've spent so long taking care of me. I just want you to let someone take care of you for once." She squeezed his hand gently, her voice trembling. "Maybe I already have," she said, glancing at him with a soft smile. For a long time, neither of them said a word. They just sat there watching the lights below. Two people bound by love that had grown deeper than words could describe. Daniel eventually started the car again. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get you home." The drive back was peaceful. The radio played softly, and the world seemed to slow down outside their window. Emma looked out, feeling a calm she hadn't felt in years. There was something healing about that night, something that reminded her that love wasn't always about romance or grand gestures. Sometimes it was in the small things, a drive, a gift, a moment of honesty. When they reached home, Daniel helped her out of the car. The porch light glowed gently, casting long shadows across the driveway. Before going inside, Emma turned to him. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you for tonight. You don't know how much it meant to me," smiled, brushing a bit of dust from his sleeve. "I think I do." She stepped forward and hugged him tightly. It wasn't the kind of hug that said goodbye. It was the kind that said, "I remember, I understand, I'm grateful," as he left. Emma stood in the doorway, holding the locket close. The night was quiet again, the house still, but something inside her had changed. She didn't feel lonely anymore. She felt full of memory, of connection, of love that had matured and deepened over years of shared life. She went to bed that night with a smile, whispering to herself, "Sometimes the simplest moments say the most." And in that stillness, she realized the ride wasn't just a drive home. It was a journey through years of love, loss, and rediscovery. After their morning coffee, Linda and Ethan walked slowly toward her doctor's building. The rain had stopped and the gray clouds were beginning to fade, letting streaks of soft sunlight spill across the streets. Ethan held the umbrella even though it wasn't needed anymore, walking close beside his mother as though the world might start raining again at any second. When they reached the entrance, Linda hesitated. "You don't need to wait, Ethan. I'll be fine," she said. He shook his head. "I'll wait. I cleared my schedule today." No meetings, no emails. Linda's heart warmed. "You cleared your schedule for me?" He smiled. "I figured you deserved at least one day where I wasn't glued to my phone." She smiled back, touched by this simple gesture. For years, Ethan had always been rushing late-night calls, urgent business trips, the constant hum of stress in his life. Seeing him now, calm and present, felt like she was getting a piece of her son back. Her appointment took nearly an hour. When she stepped out of the office, Ethan was right there in the waiting area, leaning back on the chair with his phone in his hand but eyes unfocused, lost in thought. "You waited," she said softly. He looked up immediately. "Of course. You okay?" "Yes, just the usual checkup," she replied. "Nothing dramatic." They walked back to the car together, side by side, in comfortable silence. Once inside, Ethan didn't start the engine right away. He looked at her with that same thoughtful expression he'd worn earlier at the cafe. "Mom," he began, "can I take you somewhere before I drop you home?" Linda tilted her head. "Where to?" "You'll see," he said with a mysterious grin. She raised an eyebrow but smiled. "You always had a way of keeping surprises." The drive took them out of downtown, past the familiar noise of traffic and shops, toward quieter roads lined with trees glowing from the drizzle. Linda couldn't tell where they were going, but she didn't mind. For the first time in years, she felt like life had slowed down enough for her to simply enjoy the moment. Finally. Ethan turned down a road she recognized. Her chest tightened when she realized where they were. "Ethan," she whispered, "this is." He nodded before she could finish. "Dad's old workshop." The small wooden structure sat at the edge of a park, half hidden by ivy and tall grass. It had been Mark's escapa place, where he'd spent hours fixing old clocks and carving little figures for Linda. After his passing, she hadn't been able to visit. The memories were too strong. "I thought they tore this place down," she murmured. "They were going to," Ethan said quietly. "But I bought the property a few months ago. I didn't tell you because I wanted to fix it first." Linda stared at him, speechless. You bought it." He nodded. "I know how much this place meant to you both. I thought maybe we could bring it back." Her throat tightened with emotion. She looked out at the workshop, the paint faded and windows dusty, but the shape still the same. Every corner of it whispered memories. "Ethan," she said softly, "why would you do all this?" He met her eyes. "Because I realized something, Mom. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Dad, me, the house, your job. But who's been taking care of you?" Linda felt her eyes sting. "Oh, Ethan." He gave a small, tender smile. "You deserve something for yourself. A place that's yours again." She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she reached over and squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. They stepped out of the car, the ground soft beneath their shoes from the rain. The air smelled of wet wood and pine. Ethan unlocked the old door, and as it creaked open, a rush of nostalgia hit Linda so hard she almost lost her breath. Inside, the workshop was quiet and full of dust, but sunlight streamed through the window like a blessing. On the wall hung some of Mark's old tools, still there, untouched. Linda ran her fingers along a wooden bench and smiled faintly. "He would have loved this," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "I wanted to clean it up before showing you, but maybe it's better this way. You can decide what stays." Linda turned toward him. "You did all this for me." He hesitated, his voice low. "For us, Mom, you and Dad both." There was a warmth in his tone that softened her heart completely. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed being seen, not just as a mother, but as a woman with her own memories and feelings. For years, her world had revolved around everyone else. But now, standing beside her grown son in the place that once held so much love, she felt something shift quietly inside her, a healing she hadn't known she needed. She walked around the room slowly, taking in every detail, every speck of dust that carried the past. Ethan followed her quietly, giving her space but staying close. At one point, she stopped by the window. Outside, the trees shimmered under the soft sunlight, and a single bird perched on the fence, shaking off the rain. "It's strange," she said softly. "When your father was alive, I used to imagine what life would look like when it was just me. But I never pictured this. I thought the world would feel empty, but it doesn't right now." Ethan's voice was gentle. "Maybe that's because you're not alone." She turned to look at him. His expression was calm but full of something deep, the kind of care that doesn't need big words. They spent the next hour tidying up a bit, brushing off cobwebs, opening windows. The air grew lighter, fresher. At one point, Linda found a small wooden box tucked under a shelf. She opened it carefully and gasped. Inside was one of Mark's old carvings, a little heart-shaped figure with her initials and his daughter eyes filled with tears. "He made this on our 10th anniversary, she whispered. Ethan smiled gently. "I remember. He stayed up all night finishing it." Linda smiled through the tears. "You were just a boy. How do you remember all that?" He shrugged. "Because that night was the first time I saw how much love could mean. I've never forgotten that." She looked at him, realizing how much he had grown, not just older, but wiser, gentler. The boy who once clung to her hand at the park had become a man who now stood beside her, helping her remember how to feel alive again as the afternoon sun began to fade. They locked the workshop and sat on the front step. The world around them was quiet, painted in gold. "I've been thinking," Ethan said after a long pause. "What if we turn this place into something special? A little art space, or maybe a memory room for Dad's work. You could come here whenever you want. Maybe I could join you on weekends." Linda smiled, the idea warming her heart. "That sounds wonderful." He nodded, eyes soft. "I don't want you to ever feel lonely again, Mom. I want you to know you're still the heart of this family." She reached for his hand. "You don't know how much that means to me." He squeezed her hand in return. "I do, Mom, more than you think." They sat quietly, watching the sun slip lower behind the trees. The light glowed on their faces, and for the first time in years, Linda felt completely at peace in that moment. She realized something important. Love doesn't always fade when someone is gone. Sometimes it changes shape, moving quietly from one heart to another, finding new ways to remind us that we are still connected. And as Ethan looked at her, truly looked at her, she saw not just her son, but the reflection of the love she and Mark had built together. The same kindness, the same warmth, the same ability to care deeply. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and rain, and Linda smiled softly. "Thank you, Ethan," she whispered. "For what?" "For remembering me," she said. "Not as someone who used to be important, but as someone who still is." Ethan smiled, eyes glistening. "You've always been, Mom. I just needed to slow down long enough to see it." They sat there until the sun dipped below the horizon, the old workshop standing quietly behind them like a silent guardian of all the love that had ever passed through their lives. Linda didn't know what the future would bring, but one thing was clear: today had changed something between them. It wasn't just a ride anymore. It was the start of a new chapter, one built not on duty, but on genuine understanding and renewed love.